Hey, what's up you guys? Chris here. So I've been noticing a really interesting phenomenon occurring where a lot of our clients are walking away from their exes and their exes are coming back. So today I thought it'd be interesting to take a deep dive and look exactly at why this phenomenon is occurring. So if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm gonna answer how often exes just come back, when they come back, and figuring out the root cause of what causes exes to come back when you've actually walked away from them. And finally, we need to have an honest discussion about the grass is greener syndrome because most people aren't telling you the truth about it. So like always, when I start really big topics like this, I like to gather a bunch of research, whether that's from internal sources or external sources. Anyways, when trying to figure out why this phenomenon of you walking away from your ex and then your ex suddenly coming back is occurring, I happened to stumble upon this thread in our private Facebook support group. So essentially just someone asking, do they always come back? And it really struck me as interesting because there was 88 comments of our clients responding about their personal experiences throughout their past relationships on how often exes came back. But if we're being honest, 20 of those comments were just responses to comments in and of themselves. So really it was more like 60 comments. So I spent the better part of an hour going through each one of the responses and divided them up into 3 specific categories. Category 1, the ex came back. Category 2, the ex didn't come back. And category 3, the commenter simply just did not answer the question. So here was the breakdown. 60% of people said that their ex or an ex has come back at some point in their lives. 20% of people said their exes didn't come back. And 20% of people didn't answer the question. But if you throw the category of people who didn't answer the question out, the numbers look a little bit more interesting. 75% of people said their exes came back. 25% of people said their exes didn't come back. But that actually wasn't the interesting part. I mean, 75% of our clients saying, hey, at some point an ex will come back seems like an insane number, but that's actually not what I was drawn to. What I was drawn to were the little details people would add on to their comments when responding to this thread. They would say something along the lines of, hey, my ex came back, but these kind of criteria need to be met first. And it's that criteria that made me want to film this entire video. You see, what really matters for the people who answered this thread is when their ex came back. And after spending another hour poring over the responses of people who said that they got their exes back, or their ex at least came back to them, I noticed that you could pretty much put all of these special criteria into 4 distinct buckets. They are as follows. The wrong exes came back, the ones they didn't want anymore. Their ex always came back when they felt like they've decided they didn't want their ex back anymore. Or their ex came back when they were talking to someone else. Or their ex came back when it was too late, meaning a lot of time had passed. They had moved on, weren't interested in re-pursuing the relationship. And just for good measure, because I know there's gonna be someone watching this video and saying, well, Chris is just making all of this stuff up. Here are really great examples showing each one of these categories in a comment form. So here we have, it's always the exes you don't want coming back. This person said yes, and even the exes you don't want. The only one that didn't was my ex-husband. If I knew about this program then, he probably would have. Then of course we have the, well, mine came back, but I was talking to someone else type of comment. Well, mine did 5 months later and I was moving on talking to someone. Then we have, of course, the mine came back after I didn't want them back anymore. Yes, it takes time sometimes, but they always do. Sometimes after we move on and don't want them anymore. And then finally we have the mine came back when it was too late kind of response. Most of mine have resurfaced at some point too late for me to be interested anymore. Some resurfaced years later. But the question remains, why are exes coming back when you are walking away? So my team and I really think it has something to do with attachment styles, specifically anxious attachment styles and avoidant attachment styles. Now, if you're really talking about how to sum up these 2 different types of attachment styles without going on a long-winded explanation, think of it like this. Each of the 2 attachment styles I just mentioned have a core wound. And the core wound for an anxious person is they have a fear of abandonment. So that means anytime they enter into a relationship with someone, and they feel like that person is moving away or going to abandon them, they freak out trying to fix it and keep the relationship together, which usually in turn just sort of pushes the person away. Now, on the other hand, the avoidant person is a lot different. The avoidant person has a core wound of a loss of independence. So while you have the anxious person being afraid that they're going to lose the relationship, you have the avoidant person afraid that they are going to lose their independence. Both are afraid of losing something, but different somethings. Now, this becomes extremely relevant in our circumstances because really, most of our clients are anxious by nature, while most of our clients' exes are avoidant by nature. Most of the people watching this will probably have anxious attachment styles if you're trying to get an ex back, assuming that's what you want. Now, where that's important is the anxious person typically after a breakup will do everything they can to fix the relationship. That means begging for their ex back, trying to get their ex back, natting their ex, you name it, they're doing it. But what that usually does for our clients is the more they try, the more they push that avoidant person away. The avoidant person is simply saying, I just want to keep my own independence. I'm happy now that we're broken up. I can find myself. The anxious person is saying, no, you're going to stay with me. And that whole thing happens. Now, the average person who comes and watches our videos and wants their ex back usually doesn't get their ex back. Why? Well, it's because of their anxious attachment style, usually, meaning they aren't able to turn it off or at least turn it down, and they end up pushing the avoidant so far away that no reconciliation can usually happen. But this is where things really come into focus. The anxious person, obviously, is giving up. It's been a long time, they've tried everything, it's time to find a new person. And when they find that new person, that's when the avoidant ex really starts to feel nostalgia, and that's when they come back. So essentially, by walking away, they allow the avoidant to miss them. And this is a phenomenon actually backed up by real research. Now, according to Free to Attach, probably one of the best attachment-based websites revolving around helping you understand avoidant attachment styles, they say avoidants are free to long for an ex once that person is unavailable out of a relationship, and typically out of context, so they are untouched by the actual engagement and their deactivation systems aren't triggered. But it's really this part right here about the whole thing that interests me. The post-relationship longing is often after they fail to find an emotional bond with new prospects, as is likely, and long after the original relationship has gone stale, aka the grass is greener syndrome. All right, so we've covered sort of the psychological reason for why we think walking away from an ex is working, why this phenomenon keeps occurring when our clients walk away where they don't want their ex back anymore, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Their ex comes back. Well, what's playing into this a little bit is something called the grass is greener syndrome. And essentially every breakup at its core has some element of a grass is greener syndrome. It's two people agreeing not to be in a relationship anymore, but really the cusp of the breakup is one of the two people thinks that they can find someone else to better fit their needs. The grass is greener on the other side of the fence, so they're gonna go check it out. So let's assume that your ex broke up with you. They're essentially making this admission. They think they can do better than you and find someone else who's better. Now, what makes this discussion interesting is that a lot of times clients who are coming to us have had years together with their exes. And like it or not, time is one of the ways that we best measure commitment. So in the past, I've talked a little bit about this concept called the interdependence theory. So essentially, it's how people value relationships, and they usually use three sets of criteria: satisfaction, alternatives, and investment. So satisfaction, how satisfied they are in the relationship. Investment, how much have they invested into the relationship? Time, money, energy. And then obviously alternatives. Can they find someone else to better fit their needs? Well, investment, time specifically, is one of the things that we look at that kind of give you a leg up over someone new. So let's assume that your ex does move on to someone else. Guess what's gonna happen? Inevitably, they're gonna compare you to them. And at first, you're gonna fail miserably. And that's really due to the honeymoon period effect. Now, recently I did a video really dissecting rebound relationships. Specifically, what makes rebound relationships tick? What is the allure to them? A lot of exes who go on the rebound constantly from rebound to rebound are almost like drug addicts looking for a fix. Weird analogy, but bear with me here. And the fix really for them is this small period of time at the beginning of a relationship called the honeymoon period. We've all heard about this. We've all experienced it in and of ourselves. They're going from relationship to relationship, trying to find a fix of a honeymoon period. But once that fix wears off, they start to compare you to the phantom ex, the person they were with a long time, and the person they're currently with doesn't measure up. So maybe they try to break up with that person that they're currently with, and they try to revisit things with you. But interestingly enough, usually when this all has happened, it doesn't happen in a span of a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months. Sometimes it can take years for this whole cycle to play out. So by the time they're interested in revisiting things with you, they've been through this entire journey and realized, man, the grass really wasn't greener on that other side, but it was so great with this one person I was with for a very long time. Let me hit them up. Let me see how they're doing. But by then you've moved on. So ultimately, oftentimes when you come to my YouTube channel or you read my website or you listen to my podcast, the one thing I always peddle over and over and over again is the importance of outgrowing your ex during no contact periods or just in the post-breakup period in general. The reason for that is because of this phenomenon of walking away and an ex suddenly coming back. This is the thing, it's not something you can pretend or fake. One of the things that I found really interesting when I interviewed success stories for my podcast is I would always ask them, hey, is this something you can kind of like fake it till you make it? And the answer they always give me is no, it needs to be authentic. So as weird as it sounds, as cliche as it sounds, one of the best ways to help you raise your chances of getting an ex back is to walk away. But usually the irony is when you've really walked away, you don't want them back anymore. But that's all semantics. You want to know what works? That's what works.